This is Comic Shenanigans, episode 1137, Book of the Month Club, Captain America, Volume 14, 1-5.
But ain't no stopping them shenanigans. Love getting into shenanigans. All up in them shenanigans. 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 Shenanigans.
Welcome to the Comic Shenanigans podcast. I'm your host, Adam Chapman. This is episode 1137, Book of the Month Club on Captain America 1-5. This is the newest series by Chip Zdarsky that launched in 2025. So often we look at older stuff. This time we're talking about something pretty new, or at least pretty recent. I'm joined by my co-host, Nathan Struck. Nathan, say hello.
Hi.
So I'm pretty sure your experience with Chip Zdarsky is relatively limited in terms of him as a writer, right?
I have his Daredevil run, at least like the first few volumes, and then I've picked things, some Spider-Man stuff, big Spider-Man Deadpool. But yeah, I don't know, I guess in the grand scheme of things, somewhat limited. I mean, you've let me public domain, so I've read the first two volumes of that, so I don't know what percentage you consider as qualified for a significant fan, but I'm a fan of his. But I'm always open to reading more. Okay, well, yeah, it's interesting because I would say this is part of his kind of second period Marvel Renaissance, because he'd done a lot of work for Marvel before. He had done. Oh my god, I'm blanking on some of it now. But he had done, well, obviously Daredevil's the biggest one. And then he kind of crossed the street and for a little bit was actually writing Batman and Daredevil at the same time. So he's dabbled kind of with both companies. But this is kind of him coming back to Marvel in a big way and taking more of a leadership role and starting to kind of craft out bigger things. And so Captain America was kind of the beginning of that. This first arc kind of establishes his tone, but a lot of it's obviously a retro story of a different style than we're used to with Cap. Kind of firmly implanting him coming out of the ice in a post 9/11 world, and what that would look like in a way that no one else has really tackled, to be honest. So it's been interesting to kind of see that perspective. And then he's going to be writing something called Armageddon that's coming out this year. So he's really kind of doing a lot more at Marvel right now. He's also well known as being the artist on Sex Criminals that he did with Matt Fraction for many years. So yeah. I say many years, but I think it had 29 issues. But it was still pretty impactful. It's interesting now. I think people forget that he's an artist as well. Obviously, he does public domain as well. But for the most part, these days he's known as a writer. He's had a long run in Spectacular Spider-Man. So yeah, he's definitely been around. He's a known quantity at this point. So I'm curious where did you know of where Captain America would even pick up at this point? I don't think you're really in the zeitgeist right now in terms of where Steve Rogers is as a character. And to be honest, this storyline doesn't ask you to be. It kind of lets you have a whole new adventure with an earlier version of Cap. So what were your thoughts kind of coming in? I stepped away from monthly reading for the last few years, and then when I was doing a lot more of the monthly stuff, and then even then, not really monthly, as lots of it was collected editions, mostly X-Men, Spider-Man when Zeb was doing his thing. Mm-hmm. I'm now kind of moving to the point where my favorite characters, I wait for celebrated storylines and then mostly just want to gravitate towards those. And the world cops stuff, the police force of the Avengers has become less interesting to me. Cap, really, I don't think I've read much since Brubaker era. I think it was the kind of time I stepped away. I really got into reading Cap, and I'm sure this has come up more than once on the show. A little bit before Heroes were born, then quite a great deal with Heroes Return. That was a really good run. I enjoyed Mark Waid's stuff there with Andy Kubert. And then Marvel Knights, right? The stuff that comes out, which again I thought was quite interesting, that my tethers, my threads to Cap, for the most part, have been Brubaker, Waid, and John Nay Reiber, his work on the Marvel Knights book with John Cassidy, which is in 9/11, basically in the shadow and the smoke and the fall of the towers, and how Cap reacts to those towers to this, right, which is very much centered. I mean, I don't know if we're going to count Ultimate Cap here, but I read some Ultimate Cap solo stuff and enjoyed what Millar was doing at the time in Ultimates. But for 616 stuff, yeah, this is kind of my dabbling, and this feels in so many ways like Chip read Reber. Is it Reiber or Reber?
I don't know. I'm going to go with Reiber.
Okay, with Reiber's Marvel Knights, and thought, yeah, what if I updated it? Or maybe he didn't, but it just there's so much about this that I really connect to, and I really love that Marvel Knights more than just the first arc. I know the first arc's the best arc. Cassaday's work there is also incredible, but there's other stuff to enjoy after that. So I have a great affinity for that era, and this takes me back. So I really enjoyed it. I'm glad that you recommended this to me.
So I'm always curious, again, when I give people more modern stuff, because, I mean, it's easier for us to have our rose-colored glasses about certain periods. This is a much more modern tale. So, and it establishes the idea that there was another Captain America functioning in the post-9/11 world, which even makes sense with the pre-existing history of Cap, because we knew there was Cold War Caps, obviously. Like, they keep trotting out these characters over the years, so it's interesting to kind of have a new version of that kind of brought into play. What did you think about this new version of a Captain America and what he would be like in a post 9/11 world as someone who was very impressionable and at first kind of idealistic and then kind of lost that idealism in a way that we're not used to seeing from someone named Captain America?
Yeah, I mean, isn't this the same story again and again? This is the cycle. This is the proto side, right? This is, a crazy, right? Cold War Cap goes crazy too, right? Like, this is the formula didn't work quite right on this guy, and it's messed with his brain. And why do we keep doing this? I do like that moment. I don't remember which issue it is, where they talk about none of the worlds in the UN, none of the world's developed nations wanted to basically treat the super soldier projects as chemical weapons, like where you said, like, this is against the conventions. I think it's Geneva Conventions for chemical weapons, so I'm not quite sure. I think that's really more about prisoners. So we're going to outlaw that. We're all going to agree not to go forward with developing chemical weapons. We're going to kind of be at a standstill with that. And instead they go, no one wants to disavow that. No one wants to step away from it. So Cap gets some kind of leeway here because they all want to do what America's doing anyway, and they just keep doing it. It went wrong. So yeah, that idea of the Frankenstein tale, right? Like, the science got too far, or it wasn't done quite right, or it didn't spend enough time in the oven. And so Cap, of course, has to stand alone. It's the last son of Krypton of it all, right? Like, Cap matters less when he's in a world brimming with super soldiers, which, again, Mark Millar plays a lot with in Ultimates, and more particularly Ultimates 2, with Captain Britain, and then there's a Captain Iraq, right? Like, there's super soldiers from everywhere, and you're kind of like, okay, if there's a million Kryptonians and super soldiers, what makes these guys special? So you always have to kind of. I knew what was going to happen, unfortunately, right? Just because of that pattern, but I like the origin they give him. I like that he has he's a reason for his jingoistic turn. That the first few pages are quite excellent. I love the lines. It really was arresting. I think it's the second panel. Are we worth saving? And if we are, am I willing to become the thing I hate to save us? Am I willing to be a killer? Which again is, of course, a little bit ironic because the whole nature of American empire and, Al-Qaeda, one could argue Al-Qaeda's attack, even to begin with, on the World Trade Center is in part because of American imperialism and American killing outside of their country. But Cap asks the same question: are we worth saving? And it's still a question. This is so pressing, right? Like, what's happening now? The fact that this is a 2025 arc, and now with at the time of this recording, right? America's invasion of Iraq, America's invasion of Venezuela, talks of invading other countries to do their own thing, destabilizing of gas prices, and some people are saying, are we entering into a third world war? And even Jon Stewart, I think, is one of his more recent podcast episodes, asked a similar question, like, are we, what are we doing? Like, do we deserve to be who we think we are? Is America an old idea from a bygone era? Do we even stand for anything anymore? We used to say that the thing that makes America America is a moral code, that we believe in freedom and liberty for all, and yet it's not that anymore. It's more about tribalism and us versus them, and so it seems like Chip is really delving into a lot of this stuff. So I really, the poli-sci background, I enjoy history, so this was really my jam.
It's interesting as well. I mean, that he writes. Sorry, not that you can't. Sorry, he's a Canadian, and yet he does such a great job, kind of channeling what the American mindset is. And maybe that sounds naive, but it's really interesting again how he's able to articulate like what Cap is. What I find so interesting about these types of stories when we get them, which is Steve right out of the ice, is to that the whole man out of time, and like in modern comics we've lost that just because Cap's been around a long time now in the Marvel universe, and everyone just kind of knows him and trusts him for the most part generally, and yet it's really interesting to go back to when he's just come back and he's like, well, I'm just a soldier, I'm just a guy, and having to deal with the fact, well, now he's an icon, he's something else. And again, this isn't new necessarily for Cap, and we've even seen modern Cap deal with this. Like when Cap came back during Heroes Return, and he first shows up in Japan, and there's Captain America frenzy. That's something that he's having to deal with. This is different but similar, and I like the idea that he doesn't even have his main costume when they first go to Latveria. Like he is wearing something else, and the idea that he kind of shines through that he's not that guy. He's not the Wetworks guy. Like he is going to be who he is, but finding out who he is at the same time. Him dealing with Ross is kind of a natural spot for him to, that's the most prominent military member that we know in the MCU, MU, so it makes sense to kind of use that type of character. I just found it really engaging and interesting, and when I first read that they were going to kind of do not an origin story, but kind of a flashback, I was like, well, that's kind of an interesting place to start a new ongoing. Why wouldn't you just do that as a miniseries? But I'm glad they did it this way, and then the following issues kind of pull up some of these threads and move forward. But I'm hoping that this isn't the last we see of this kind of 9/11 Cap, for lack of a better term, because I do find him very interesting. He's wrestling with a lot of things and kind of losing who he was. I wonder where he would be now.
Yeah, I also agree. I like the soldier focus. That's also one of the things that is a push and pull for me. I'm not really interested in seeing what ultimately... I mean, Captain America begins, right? Joe Simon as war propaganda, to help American kids make sense of the war, but also to kind of, stir up that feeling of patriotism. And so... It's not really addressed so much in the Golden Age comics because he's not there to question his own identity, but it comes out a lot in later texts, post you could argue modernist take, where he's constantly going like, look, I signed up to fight. I want to punch Hitler in the mouth. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be here on stage. And they do it again in the MCU, and here he gets to immediately, even though he is draped in the colors of the flag and everyone's kind of reacted to him as this walking propaganda piece, he's identifying himself by his not his regiment. No, he doesn't. No, his I guess it's called the regiment. I don't know the military terms. Captain, the Commando's Infantry, World War II. And he's trying to talk to another soldier who's clearly suffering from delusion or mental illness or something. Otherwise, he's taken to this desperate act of violence to talk him down and be like, "Look, I'm here for you. Maybe America's not. Maybe the society's left you behind, but I'm here to, I guess, rescue my own. I'm one of the only people that you can see or can trust and can listen to, and I'm your commanding officer." So, again, I'm not a huge fan of these hierarchies and the hierarchical nature of the military, but he's trying his best to use them for good. And putting himself on the line, right? His shield is down and away and on his back in this scene. He's standing in front of a guy who was a bomb, and he's willing to be vulnerable to save another soldier's life, right? Which immediately makes me feel like, look, this guy does stand for hope, right? That's what Superman is supposed to be in his best moments, and it's also what Cap is supposed to be. And so, again, I feel like Chip really draws me in. And it's multiple times. There's another time when Reed meets him later on, and they're having a conversation that I thought was also striking, and I was thinking about maybe using in the future, taking screenshots, coming back to it, and so I really enjoyed Chip's general take on the hopefulness of Cap. And you're right, rejecting the wet work suit. Although it did take me back to Captain America: Winter Soldier, the movie, and the stealth suit, and the incredible. I know this is not an MCU podcast, but what the Russo brothers did there with how fast he's running and how hard he's hitting people, like it really. After the first Avengers film, people were kind of like, "Oh, man, Hawkeye shoots a bow and arrow. Why is he there? Black Widow shoot a gun. Why is she there?" And Cap can throw a disc. Like he wasn't really that much of a standout. He rides on a motorcycle, I guess, but they really soup him up into a superhuman, and it feels like he's that kind of unstoppable force here until he meets a Doombot, and then it's kind of like the world is swallowing him. Like he says that I am out of time. I'm not prepared for this. I fought other robots. He'll fight a Zolobot, but this is not. So. Yeah, really good stakes, too.
It's interesting having him go up against Doom, because on the face of it, you'd be like, well, that's an odd choice. But when you read the story, it actually makes perfect sense, the idea that, he just got finished fighting a fascist, and I love the idea that, he didn't get to finish out the war. So he has these feelings of, like, he doesn't feel like Hitler ever came to justice. Hitler took the easy way out, and he's like, well, we never got what we were looking for. He's like, well, maybe this is what I'm here to do. And it's not common that we're used to kind of hearing or seeing Cap almost feel like destiny, like he's meant to be here back to do something. That's not usually the way that we see Cap thinking. So I like the idea of kind of when he comes back, again, the idea of searching for purpose. Why am I here? Why did I survive? And then maybe I'm back to do this thing. To take down another despot. And then I love that twist there where, Doom's like, welcome, like he's venerating Cap, and kind of puts him up on a pedestal, so to speak, is not what you expect either. The idea that, but of course he would. It was this guy who, fought against tyranny and, represented the common man. There's a lot of jingoism that we think of from the U.S. perspective, but what would this guy whose dad knew a lot about, what was going on in Europe, what would their interpretation be? So I really love that kind of twist, because I don't think you see it coming. And then once it happens, you're like, well, that does make a lot of sense.
And even like a little bit, I do like the kings, the conflicts that are just even hinted at sometimes. So yeah, you have the king to king, or the would-be king, the would-be king of the new Reich with Hitler, and then you have the new king emperor in Doom and what he wants to do with Europe. But even before we really get there, there's even those little moments of the Mole Man, right? Like he would be king, and he also finds injustice in the world, and these superheroes are just going around punching these guys in the face. I love that little line. Cap grabs Mole Man and says, "Gentlemen, I think this is the source of your problems." And Mole Man says, "Humanity is the source of Mole Man's problems." And I'm like, "Aw, poor guy! Like, I want to hear more about that." And he's just like thrown away. But yeah, like this again, this quite prescient story about what is America's role. It's both Cap's role, right? Is Cap still valid, valuable, purposeful? Do I have a purpose? Did it mean anything? And then there's also the larger America question: what is America's purpose in the world? Does it deserve to be around anymore? Should I keep fighting for that America? Is that old America still around anymore? And then what is America's role in the world? Like, do they have a right to invade other countries when they deem that country to be unstable or violent or whatever? And then you, of course, you find out, right, that America is actually trying to prevent or to the fact that they helped topple the previous tyrant to install a new tyrant, or dictator, which is also a common thing in history, that they think they can control. And of course, that's laughable that they thought they could control Victor Von Doom. And so Cap gets to be just both disillusioned at the same time, right? There's lots of Cap stories about him being disillusioned. All really tightly packed in this 5-issue story. And that also is of great interest to me, right? Like, again, like the statement, something about like interventionism. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. It's a really tough coin to flip, because I guess one of the sayings is America got involved in Afghanistan and Iraq, and that went, I'll say that in better words, really badly. America didn't get involved directly in Libya. They stayed out of Libya. And that went badly. And they got indirectly involved in Syria, and that went badly. And like all these ideas of like how direct or indirect or no involvement, things still seem to not end up so well. So what do you do? And again, lots of conversations right now about what things that are going on in the world, and what right does a sovereign nation have to invade another nation? And Chip's going for it, right? Like he's I love when Cap gets political and is allowed to get political. I love also, back to your point about Cap being more of a human being and less of just an icon. He's had survivor's guilt before, right? The whole Bucky of it all, and I wish it was me instead of Bucky. That he's allowed to have. And maybe a girlfriend every once in a while, and then, maybe, they'll get to a storyline where he faces some disillusionment. But these ideas of him being a Christian, like, he seems very clearly Christian, at least God-fearing, God-believing. He's allowed to be that in this. And does God even exist in this world? And that destiny thing too, right? Like, trying to make sense of it. What is my purpose? Was I meant to be here? Yeah, maybe this is the chance I get to finally defeat Hitler. Like, that all feels both more meaningful and he feels more of a character, right? And less of an emblem. And I also appreciated that. I would love to read more Chip stuff. Did you say that this story kept going, or that this is a 5-issue done?
Well, the ongoing
series?
It's an ongoing series, so he's not done with Cap. Like, it keeps moving forward.
Okay, good. So I would definitely like to read more. That's good to know that he's still going on this.
I want to mention. So you mentioned earlier how he goes to meet the Fantastic Four and then speaks with Reed. A couple of things about that conversation with Reed. I love the idea. Again, speaking to what Steve is saying, he's like wondering if it's fate that he's here. Is he supposed to stop the next Hitler before he starts? I love that, but I do like almost immediately Reed kind of discounts that and is like, he's not Hitler. He's full of ego and hate. And then I don't know if it's ever been that articulated that Reed understood, at least this early, just what was driving Victor, and the fact for the family he couldn't save. Like, it's for a guy who's usually written as being very aloof. It felt very emotionally intelligent, to understand what was kind of going on to the hood of Victor and why he is acting the way that he is, in a way that I don't know. In some ways, I almost don't buy it, but also I kind of like that. Just for a moment, Reed could actually turn on that emotional intelligence and understand that piece of Victor. And then right after that, we get that great sequence where someone comes up to them and thinks that, oh, you're Reed Richards, you're that guy. And he makes his face, like, modifies his face. He's like, oh, no, I'm just some guy. Love that idea. I wonder how long Chip has had that in his noggin as a fun little thing that it's not like a story beat. It's just like an incidental that's a really nice touch.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would also like to see more from the Fantastic Four here. I also really like the art here. This is it Schiti?
Yeah.
On art. The way that he draws the Human Torch, the incredible power. Like, I've always felt like if the Fantastic Four to be cosmic heroes, they seem to just be lacking. It's really irregular, their power levels, right? Like, he can go Nova Fire, but the rest of the time he's just like a really hot boy. Like, that trail explosion of fire at his feet, and this nimbus cone of, like, heat at his fingertips, and then this waves flamethrower. And then to say fire ain't doing the trick, so I guess he's a good fire. Sue, of course, has lots of, again, variants in her power levels, but those bubbles that can burst your brain, and the thing, is he a match for the Hulk or not, right? Up and down. And I'm sorry to go off on a small tangent, but in gaming, it's always been extremely frustrating. I was an overpowered player back in the day, and then the HeroClix players, and again, even with Marvel United, and I played only a little bit of Versus. I can't really speak to Versus. I don't have a lot of memory for them. And that, they just seem to always be underpowered, right? Maybe they give them a little trick here or there where they can kind of compete, or they'll release an Ellie figure in HeroClix who's, got a 19 defense to Storm, or who everyone can copy her defense, and that's pretty cool. But for the most part, they just seem to be outclassed. So this image was really cool. Like, it seemed like they all were very powerful in one image. So it's just props to Schiti's art. But yeah, like, I love how Reed talks about Steve as, like, the good man. You are the good man. You are the honorable man. You're the one who doesn't give up. And he's given Reed a moral compass, right? Like, Reed is not perfect, but he's been given something to strive for, some principles to strive for, and I just found that really cool. The way I think it was written very well. It felt very heartfelt, and it felt very sincere. And I wasn't expecting that from Reed. Yeah, I was kind of. He usually is, as you say, emotionally aloof. Sometimes to the detriment of the story. And I felt like, yeah, he was like he feels like the kind of guy that would be fun to have a meal with, actually, which wasn't surprising. I wasn't expecting.
Now, before I guess we no discussion of this is complete without talking about the art. So we mentioned it's by Valerio Schiti, who I think does a beautiful job throughout this 5-page arc. I also got to mention Frank Martin on colors does an amazing job as well, kind of setting apart the flashbacks to Dave Colton's, his past, to kind of contrast that with the main action that we have going forward. But yeah, this is just beautiful work. It's really clean, simple lines. It's not trying to be too busy, but very impactful. And a lot of this is real world stuff, and yet he does such a great job at it. Like, there's some really harrowing stuff in, like, I think issue 2 or 3, where you see like the image that Colton keeps dealing with of that child dying and kind of being gunned down. Like, that's a very impactful image because of what's not in the panel. Like, it's so simple, and he's just like almost a silhouette, but not quite. It's a little bit more in frame than that, but just kind of seeing a bit of the blood splatters. Like, it's harrowing stuff. But it really feels very grounded, and it's part of what makes this book work. And when you do get the bigger kind of energy spots of Doom later, it feels earned because you've got to live in this world first, and it felt very real world. And now you can see Steve feeling like, oh my god, I could maybe fight up one robot, not all of these robots, like, and being overwhelmed and having all these energies. Like, at the end of the day, he's just a guy that throws something. At least that's how he views himself, right? And that he's not, he's not more than that. But this is fantastic.
And the way that Schiti draws Colton's life, right? Like, all through all these stages of his life, from youth to young to teenager to young man to grizzled vet, as it were, with hair growth and haircuts and changing of like facial features, really does a great job. And I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus per se. These are all artists who are better than I can ever be. But some people, I don't know, rock stars like David Finch really struggles with like faces and different faces and ages, and really shows his chops here. That, like, there's that joke, right, that sometimes comic artists are the best at drawing everything possible, everything imaginable. They can draw worlds within worlds, Doctor Strange going through portals, but don't ask them to draw a baby. Because sometimes it's like the baby images just don't work. You know what I mean, right?
It's nightmare fuel.
And it's multiple artists. I'm not picking anyone in particular here, but I feel like Schiti could draw a good baby. That's I didn't think you'd think I'd make that statement or that kind of compliment, but every age range here, like from old to young, he nails, and they're all distinct and recognizable, including when Colton is what's the name of the character who is in that who gets shot in Afghanistan, who was working with the Americans. He's got a name. Anyway, in that scene, again, harrowing, really intense, terrifying, great writing, but the drawing on that character is really, really good. And I love the part where he's there in the room and he's like, why are you here? What's going on? And he starts talking about warlords. There was warlords before the Taliban. They controlled so much. This warlord killed my sister. And if I'm free, then he's free. If I'm free, then he's free. The vacuum, there's always a vacuum. And there's so much packed into that. There's so much history and politics packed into that. And like, Zdarsky doesn't even, he just like leaves it there. Like, I love that the world feels, but in one, like you're saying, there's these very real moments, real places, real settings, drawn extremely well. So that when you get to the fantasy, it's like, I can buy into this. Like, okay, but I know there's a real thing. I've been grounded, and it also, nothing feels one-dimensional. The characters, right? Like, I'm sorry that David, doesn't stick around longer. I'm sad that he, at the end of the story, spoilers, like, he doesn't make it, because he's made so compelling and so tragic, and there's so much time spent on him. And then he's gone, and you're like, but that's really good storytelling. And Zdarsky doesn't spend all this time belaboring every point he brings up about the complexities of the world and like the histories. He gives you some moments, he lets you like learn about it, and then he's off to the next thing. Because in real life, people don't explain everything about their society or the intricacies of social cohesion, right? So it really feels that there's here's a great Adam word, a gravitas, right, to each of the characters and each of the countries or the scenes that they transport to.
I do really like the sequence, I guess in issue 4, where Cap beats up Doom so much that it shatters the the mask plate, and then you see this great kind of image of just part of his face kind of peeking out and just kind of silhouetted his eyes and his teeth. But again, you don't see much of Doom's actual visage. I thought that was a great artistic choice. And then just from a writing perspective, Reed Richards says hello as he like knocks him out. It's a pretty good shot.
Yeah, no, like the keeping the mystery alive, not showing too much of Doom's face. That's a favorite, right? Because it's scarier to imagine than to see. Yeah, they do a really good job of keeping that a mystery, and I guess that's the point, right? The point is that the true ugliness of Doom is in his philosophy, not what his face looks like. But yeah, there's some really, really good work with the energy blasts and the horror elements and the shadows. All throughout this, yeah. And also the Doombot. I mean, even as the Doombot's drawn, the cape is extra long. It's like tattered and dragging around on the floor. I don't know. It seems like Doom himself, when he's drawn, there's slightly different colors too used, right? Like the colorist is going like, this is the real Doom, and you can tell. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're not exactly the same. And he's more clean. His armor is usually more clean and upkept than the Doombots themselves. Also love the tiny rockets that Doom has hiding in his shoulders. I love when they move away from just finger blasters.
Yes. So something to say, which I guess just happened today. So the day we speak, Wolverine Weapons of Armageddon #2 just dropped by Chip Zdarsky, and David Coulton is back.
Oh, good. Okay, well, that makes me happy.
So we're not done with him.
Okay, good. With all the work he spent on it, I would have been fine with dying. I mean, that's a very Whedon-esque thing to do, to put all this work into a character and make you love them and then take them away, or make you pity them. And but yeah, okay. Well, he's an interesting character that I'm happy to see what they do with next.
So next year we can talk about Wolverine Weapons of Armageddon.
Great, I look forward to it. Really love the drawings on. I'm just kind of flipping through this, like the way that Schiti draws Doom's mask from different angles too. Like that can't be easy to do. Like again, in issue 4, what is it? Page 1, 2, panel 4. The angle of Doom looking away and the nose part of the faceplate, but then like the eye looking away from where the face is aimed, and I don't know, just the man in the iron mask of it all, the Darth Vader of it all, the unhumanity. Really well captured in this kind of grizzled, I don't know, skull-like. He can make it skull-like if he wants. He can make it dispassionate. Lots of variety there of emoting with the Mask of Doom, which I also really found quite noticeable. The
use of the Howling Commando chill, I think is an interesting counterpoint again to the two Captain Americas, because as much as we're seeing a very broken David Coulton, and this whole storyline breaks him further, the idea that chill is just like, we have orders are orders, and he's like, well, murdering civilians, like that's not okay. And yet by the end of those issues, Coulton's just kind of lost it, and again, it's a lot easy. It's easy because we've seen failed Caps before to be like, well, it's not just what he's been through. It can also be that the process maybe didn't quite take. We've seen this before, but it does feel, again, they spend enough time on it that him becoming this disillusioned and kind of broken makes more sense, and you can empathize with this guy who, I mean, it's kind of like the MCU's version of John Walker, right? The guy who just wanted to be Cap. He just wanted to be the guy. And he just couldn't, and his body couldn't take it, and he just kind of snapped, and he's not that guy. And how do you deal with that if that's what you wanted to do? You wanted to be that person. You wanted to be the Cap to, protect your country, and then it doesn't work out for you. What are you left with?
Yeah, and I like that it's not just the super soldiers. For at least that's what the implication seems to be here to me. Mm-hmm. It's not just the form that drove him batty. It's all his time in the service. In these theaters where it's a meat grinder, and it goes into like, oh, actually, we did so well in Afghanistan that they're now bringing us to Iraq. So like, we're amazing, we're unstoppable. On to the next thing, boys. And you can see that progression of things are not what I think they were. I'm losing my friends. I'm shell shocked. I'm seeing things. There's kids dying. I have blood on my hands. And that question he asked himself as a kid: am I willing to become the thing I hate? But that's that's the tragic flaw, right? Like, to be the hero, I mean, this is very Dark Knight-esque, I suppose, that they need you need to become the villain, and that's what happens to him. And this is an exaggerated, fantastical version of what happens to real life people who have their their psyches damaged. They go through a huge emotional turmoil, and it can be, my understanding is, like, sometimes too much for the human mind to take. And the heartbreaking aspect of his mother relationship with his mother. I'm doing this in part for my mom and for all moms and all parents who've lost their kids in 9/11 attacks. I feel like now I can't even write to my mom because the man she's writing doesn't exist anymore. Right, that boy is gone, and so I'm like alienated from myself. Like there's some good, meaningful psychological cost that's going into it here too. So it doesn't just become this simple like, oh no, I'm doing a big Frankenstein's monster again, and I'm attacking people. I'm a monster of science. There's something from real life here. There's commentary on the real world with the things that happen to soldiers. And Cap in the beginning of the story, trying his best to save a soldier. So like he's back here with Colton. He's like, I gotta save Colton. And there's that tragedy, right, where he can't seem to do it.
It's almost
which is ultimately one of the most heartfelt moments in the story. But it's played too quickly. That's one of my criticisms. I feel like that just happens too quickly. The way that the Colton stuff is resolved.
Yeah, well, I guess, if he knew that he wasn't going to resolve it maybe and that he was going to bring him back, that you kind of need to leave it enough that Cap could move on from it, but enough that there's still more for Colton to deal with. It's almost like a bit of humor, but not humor, the idea that, Colton's just like, do you know CPR? And Cap's just like, I don't know what that is. Like, that's kind of a sad moment, though. Like, you can see that there's people coming, they need to save him, and yet maybe they're going to get there too late, and if only Cap was a little less out of time, he could have saved his life. Like, that's an extra level of tragedy, which is, maybe they don't milk it very much, because he immediately shifts it to, by the way, we did this America Back Doom, right? So, like, they kind of immediately shift out of that moment. But it's interesting, just for a moment, it does linger there, and again, because you can kind of read the panels as slow as you want, you can have that be a much more pregnant pause. The idea that, if he just was a little bit more modern, he didn't have to die. Although he's not dead, but he didn't have to believe that he was dying. If only.
Yeah, I like that. The way that they talk about that paradox of like, I am too young and too old at the same time. Right? There are ways in which I am both those things, and that resonates with me in a different way. But the idea to be someone out of time or out of place, ultimately it's the out of place, right? Cap is the Rip Van Winkle, right, of retelling. And what does it mean to be a time traveler, but not the good kind, right? I'm a time traveler in that I travel with everybody, but I just missed decades or 100 years. So I'm in some ways stuck in the past. And I'm glad that Zdarsky plays with that here. I'm interested to see what else he'll do with that, because I find that a very compelling idea, and I have my own personal connections to that was very meaningful for me to read this.
We do end the 5 issues with the letter from Reed, right? The world never forgets heroes. I'm glad you're here. Like, that's again more heartfelt than we usually see Reed at all with anybody. Like, it's interesting to have him kind of do that, which I guess is almost out of character, but also, again, maybe just speaks to he's not always emotionally unintelligent. He's, again, more aloof than unintelligent, and that he kind of knows what Cap needs in this moment, and he gives him, obviously, the Bucky action figure. And even earlier when he asks, like, if anyone remembers Bucky, he's like, damn well they did. Like, there's validation for Steve that it was worth it. He's lost so much. He's it's kind of, it's something they teach you in like adoption when you adopt a child, is that no matter what situation that child's coming from, they're still losing something. There's still a sense of loss, even if they can maybe not verbalize it or understand it. They have lost a sense of self, even if there was an unconscious one. And so here, he's losing his sense of self because his sense of self is in 1945. And so now he's here, but he's dealing with profound loss. And maybe Reed's one of the only people who can really understand that somehow, because everyone else kind of goes past it, right? No one really dives deep with him or has a more emotional conversation with him about what he's really lost. And so, again, we only have a little bit here, but I do like the establishment of there being a relationship between Reed and Steve this way. Because, again, Reed is the older guy in the Marvel Universe in terms of heroes, generally. He's, there's a reason why they're the first family and everything about how Reed usually occupies that space. So I liked how they forged that bit of their relationship here. Instead of it being more obvious, being an Avenger, right? Like, you'd be like, oh, well, it makes sense he's talking to the Avengers about this stuff. I like that it was something different. I like that it was Reed instead. You still have Tony here to kind of pull him away from the military-industrial complex, which, he does in Heroes Reborn as well, in the, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld universe. After the first 6 issues, he becomes an event, like a proper Avenger when they break away from S.H.I.E.L.D. Because the first 6 issues, S.H.I.E.L.D. runs the Avengers, kind of like the Ultimates. So we have a shift. So I'm glad that they did something that was not just the Avengers being his main supporting cast.
Yeah, and really good drawings. I mean, sorry, this not that important to the story, I know, but great to see the horns on Iron Man from the era, and really great modern rendition or kind of reinterpretation of that armor, again by Schiti. But yeah, the final scene where he says, "And I'm going to keep fighting so that it all means something." Very human, right? Like my friends are dead. Everyone I know is dead. My best friend's gone, and this had to mean something. I'm going to keep my quest to find why I'm here. That's a pretty cool quest. That's even if you're not a person thawed out from an iceberg or a piece of ice, that is in a way all of our quests, right? To find meaning in what we're doing here and what we want to do with our lives. Very existential, but also very much a Captain America thing, right? Captain America has to mean something to readers, and so he's also got to kind of figure out what kind of icon or emblem he's going to end up being. So a really cool last panel, and the sun kind of shining through the American flag. So much in here about the cynicism of the military-industrial complex, around spycraft, around realpolitik, around, again, like invading, crossing sovereign borders, and yet at the same time, Zdarsky goes, yeah, but also there's some hope here. Maybe America is dubious and doesn't have scruples, but we got this one cool Captain America guy, and he's going to show us the way. I'm very interested to see if he wants to make more real kind of world connections or parallels rather to our world about what is America moral? Does America have that same message now in this era that readers would resonate with, or where we can go with this? So I have those questions.
So the next storyline in Captain America is called In Doom's Shadow, which is all after World Under Doom that just ended. One World Under Doom. So Doom is gone now. What happens to Latveria next? So Cap's coming back to Latveria, but also having difficulties with Ross, who's the Red Hulk now. I highly recommend that you do read the Red Hulk. I know I originally had pitched it to you as the opposite, or not opposite, but the other option in terms of Book of the Month Club was to read the current Red Hulk run, which is all about what happens when the Red Hulk is detained by Doom in his dungeon, and his kind of quest to both escape Doom and then fight Doom. Now, ultimately, Doom has other fish to fry in the One World Under Doom storyline, but everything that happens in the Red Hulk book is very compelling and actually leads into where we see the Red Hulk in the next Captain America arc. So Captain America 6, 7, 8, we do have the Red Hulk making an appearance, and that's going to be leading into where we kind of go next, and one of the bigger storylines in the Marvel Universe right now. So I do recommend you read the Red Hulk as well. It's written, I believe, by Benjamin Percy, who I believe did X-Force, right? Or was it Wolverine, or both?
Both.
So, I mean, if you liked his writing there, you're going to see a lot that you're going to like here. You got some Deathlock, you get some X-51, you get some Red Hulk action, so there's some good stuff to be had there.
Yeah, I've started it. I think I'm just partway through issue 1, but I would be happy to, depending on what schedule you have, if you want to talk about it sometime too, we can talk about it another time.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, Nate, thank you so much for joining. This was a real blast. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm always a little not certain when I bring newer stuff, especially if everyone's going to enjoy it, so I'm glad you did. For those who are listening, you can email us at comicshenanigans@gmail.com, rate the show on Apple Podcasts, listen to us on Apple Podcasts, and also listen to us on Spotify. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.